And what would you do if you came home early and heard your own mother whisper your name from a place she should never be? What would you do if the people you trusted were the same people destroying the ones you love behind your back? Before you answer, let me take you to the day a billionaire returned home and discovered a truth that almost broke him. The morning sun broke across the Abuja skyline, painting the glass towers in shades of amber and gold. Michael Okafor sat in the back of his private car, watching the familiar streets roll past his window. He had cut his business trip short by 3 days, something he rarely did. There was no particular reason, just a strange feeling in his chest that had grown heavier with each passing hour in Dubai. His assistants had been surprised when he announced he was leaving early, but they knew better than to question him. Michael had built his empire on instinct, on reading the invisible currents that others missed, and right now, those currents were pulling him home. The house came into view, a sprawling modern compound set back from the road, surrounded by high walls and manicured gardens. Security opened the gates without hesitation, nodding respectfully as the car passed through. Michael stepped out into the driveway, loosening his tie. The air was thick and hot, the kind of heat that made everything feel slow and heavy. He expected to hear his daughter's laughter, the sound of his mother humming in the kitchen, the gentle chaos of home. Instead, there was only silence. He walked through the front door, his shoes clicking against the marble floor. The house felt empty, though he knew people were there. He could sense their presence, hear the soft rustle of movement somewhere deeper inside. He called out for his wife, his voice echoing through the high ceilings. Amara appeared from the living room, her face brightening with surprise. She was beautiful as always, her skin glowing against the cream-colored dress she wore, her smile warm and perfect. "Michael, you're home early," she said, walking toward him with open arms. "I wasn't expecting you until Thursday." He embraced her, but the feeling in his chest didn't ease. If anything, it grew stronger. "I finished everything ahead of schedule," he said, pulling back to look at her face. "Where is everyone? Where's Mama? Where's Chidera?" Amara waved a hand dismissively, her smile never faltering. "Your mother wanted some fresh air. You know how she is, always preferring to be outside." "And Chidera is with her. They're fine, probably in the back garden." Michael nodded slowly, but something about her answer didn't sit right. His mother loved being outside. True, but not at this hour, not in this heat. He glanced past Amara toward the kitchen, where he could see 2 housekeepers standing very still, their eyes fixed on the floor. They looked nervous, almost frightened. When they noticed him watching, they quickly turned away. "Is everything all right?" he asked, turning back to his wife. "Of course," Amara said, touching his arm. "Everything is perfect. You must be tired from the flight. Come, sit down. I'll get you something cold to drink." But Michael was already moving, walking past her toward the back of the house. He heard her call his name, heard the slight edge in her voice, but he didn't stop. The feeling in his chest had become an urgency now, a pounding certainty that something was very wrong. He pushed through the kitchen, past the silent staff members who pressed themselves against the counters to let him pass, and reached for the door that led to the backyard. The heat hit him first, a wall of suffocating air that made him squint. Then he heard it, a soft, weak sound, a cough, a small voice barely audible calling out, "Daddy!" Michael's blood turned to ice. He stepped fully into the backyard, his eyes scanning the space. The garden was immaculate as always, the grass perfectly trimmed, the flowers blooming in careful rows. But there, in the far corner near the storage shed, he saw something that made his heart stop. A metal cage, the kind used for storing garden equipment or housing large dogs. Except it wasn't empty. Inside, slumped against the bars, was his mother. Her wrapper was wrinkled and dusty, her head tie askew, her face drawn and exhausted. Beside her, pressed against her side, was his 7-year-old daughter, Chidera, her small hands gripping the metal bars, her eyes wide and red from crying. Around the cage, lying in the shade but watchful, were 2 large dogs, their presence creating an invisible barrier of fear. Michael couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. For one terrible moment, his mind refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening in his home, to his family, while he was away building an empire meant to protect them. Then Chidera saw him. Her face crumpled and she reached through the bars, her voice breaking into a sob. "Daddy, Daddy, please! We've been here so long. Please get us out!" The sound of his daughter's voice shattered whatever paralysis had held him. Michael ran across the yard, his expensive shoes sinking into the soft grass. He reached the cage and dropped to his knees, his hands immediately grasping the lock. It was secured with a heavy padlock, the kind that couldn't be broken easily. His mother looked up at him with exhausted eyes, her lips cracked, sweat running down her temples despite the shade from the storage shed. "Michael," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "My son." "I'm here, Mama," he said, his voice shaking. "I'm here. I'm going to get you out." He stood and looked around desperately for something to break the lock with. His hands were trembling, his chest heaving with a rage so deep it felt like drowning. He found a metal rod leaning against the shed, grabbed it, and brought it down on the padlock with all his strength. Once, twice, 3 times. The metal shrieked and bent. On the 4th strike, the lock shattered. Michael tore open the cage door and reached inside, helping his mother to her feet. She was weak, her legs shaking, and he had to support her full weight to keep her from collapsing. Chidera scrambled out behind her, throwing her arms around Michael's waist and sobbing into his shirt. He held them both, his mother on one side, his daughter on the other, and felt something inside him break that he knew would never be whole again. Behind him he heard footsteps, slow, measured footsteps. He turned, still holding his mother and daughter, and saw Amara standing at the edge of the yard. Her face was calm, almost serene, as if she had just stepped out to water the flowers. "Michael, let me explain," she said, her voice smooth and controlled. He stared at her, really stared at her, perhaps for the first time since they had married 5 years ago. He saw the coldness in her eyes, the subtle curl of contempt at the corners of her mouth, the way she held herself with such perfect composure even now. How had he never seen it before? How had he missed every sign, every warning, every moment when the mask must have slipped? "Explain what?" His voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. "Explain why my mother and my daughter were locked in a cage like animals? Explain why they've been sitting in this heat for hours? Explain that, Amara. Please." She took a step closer, and he noticed how she carefully avoided looking at the cage, at his mother's trembling form, at Chidera's tear-stained face. "They needed discipline," she said, as if discussing something as simple as a missed homework assignment. "Your mother was being difficult, and Chidera was getting spoiled. I was trying to teach them respect, to show them that actions have consequences. You're never here, Michael. You're always traveling, always working, and someone has to maintain order in this house." Michael felt his mother stiffen in his arms. He gently helped her sit on the grass, away from the cage, and knelt beside Chidera, wiping her tears with his thumb. Then he stood and faced his wife. "Maintain order," he repeated slowly, "by locking a 70-year-old woman and a child in a metal cage in the sun." "It wasn't in the sun," Amara said defensively. "There was shade, and I left water for them." Michael looked back at the cage. He saw no water bottle, no cup, nothing. Even if there had been, it wouldn't have mattered. The fact that she thought it would matter made everything worse. "How long?" he asked. "What? How long have you been doing this? How long have you been treating them this way when I'm gone?" Amara's composure flickered for just a moment. "You're overreacting. This was the first time I ever—" "Don't lie to me." Michael's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Don't stand there and lie to my face. I want to know everything. Every single thing you've done to them while I was away." For a long moment, Amara said nothing. Then she lifted her chin, her eyes hardening. "Fine. You want the truth? Your mother is slow and useless. She makes this house feel like some village compound. I've spent years pretending to care about her stories, her traditions, her constant presence in our lives. And that child," she gestured toward Shadera without looking at her, "she's clingy and weak, always running to your mother instead of learning independence. I've been trying to toughen them up, to make them worthy of this life we've built. But every time I push them, you come home and coddle them, and all my work is undone." Michael felt the world tilt beneath his feet. This woman, this stranger, wearing his wife's face, was describing his family like they were inconveniences, obstacles to be managed and corrected. He thought of all the times he had called home from overseas, asking Amara how everyone was doing. She had always said the same thing: "Everything is wonderful. We miss you. Come home soon." He thought of the photos she had sent him, the ones showing his mother and Shidera smiling at the dinner table, playing in the garden, laughing together. All of it had been lies, carefully constructed lies designed to keep him ignorant while she inflicted her cruelty in secret. "Tell me what else you've done," he said. His voice was still quiet, but there was something in it now that made Amara take a step back. She shrugged, trying to regain her earlier confidence. "Small things. Nothing dramatic. I made your mother sit outside when she was being too talkative. I made Shadera stand in the corner when she interrupted me. I controlled the air conditioning, the food portions, the time they were allowed to move freely in the house. I had to, Michael. They needed structure. They needed to understand their place. What would you do if you returned home to this? What would you say to someone who claimed to love you while torturing the people who raised you, who depended on you, who trusted you to protect them?" Michael walked slowly toward his wife. She held her ground, her expression defiant, but he saw the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. When he was close enough to speak without raising his voice, he stopped. "Pack your things," he said. "You have 1 hour. Take whatever you brought into this marriage, nothing more. I'm calling security to escort you out. I'm calling your family to come collect you. And I'm calling my lawyers to begin divorce proceedings immediately." Amara's eyes widened. "You can't be serious. You're going to throw me out? Over this? Over them?" "Yes," Michael said simply. "Over them. Over my mother who raised me with nothing. Who sacrificed everything so I could have a chance at education. Who worked her fingers to the bone in other people's houses so I could eat. Over my daughter, who is 7 years old and should never know what fear feels like in her own home. Yes, Amara, over them, every single time. You'll regret this," Amara hissed, her beautiful face twisting with rage. "You'll be nothing without me. I made you presentable. I made you acceptable to society. I gave you the polish you needed to move in the circles that matter." Michael shook his head slowly. "You gave me nothing but lies and a pretty face to hide behind. Everything I built before you. Everything I am, I was before you. And everything I will become will be without you. Now go, before I change my mind about being civilized." Amara opened her mouth to argue, but something in Michael's eyes must have convinced her that this was not a moment for negotiation. She spun on her heel and stormed back into the house. Michael watched her go, then turned back to where his mother and daughter sat huddled together on the grass. He walked over and knelt down beside them, gathering them both into his arms again. His mother was crying now, silent tears running down her weathered cheeks. Chidera had buried her face in his shoulder, her small body shaking with sobs that seemed too big for her frame. "I'm so sorry," Michael whispered, his own voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I should have known. I should have seen it. I should have protected you." His mother reached up with a trembling hand and touched his face. "You are here now," she said softly. "That is what matters. You came home, my son. You saved us." But Michael didn't feel like he had saved anyone. He felt like he had failed them in the most fundamental way possible. He had brought danger into their lives, had married it, had given it power over them. He had been so busy chasing success, building his business empire, proving himself to the world, that he had left the people he loved most vulnerable to someone who saw them as nothing more than obstacles to remove. The next hour passed in a blur. Michael called his head of security and gave brief, direct instructions. He called Amara's parents, his voice cold, as he explained what their daughter had done and informed them she would be leaving his house immediately. He called his lawyers and initiated divorce proceedings with a speed that shocked even them. Throughout it all, he kept his mother and daughter close, bringing them inside to the living room, where he could watch them, making sure they had water, food, care. The household staff emerged from wherever they had been hiding, their faces a mixture of relief and guilt. The head housekeeper, a woman named Patience who had worked for Michael for years, approached him with tears in her eyes. "Sir, I am sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I wanted to tell you so many times, but Madam threatened us. She said, if anyone spoke to you about what was happening, she would make sure we were fired, that we would never work again. She controlled everything when you were gone. We were afraid." Michael looked at her tired face, saw the genuine distress there, and nodded. "I understand. But from now on, if anything like this ever happens again, you come to me immediately. I don't care what threats are made. You protect my family, and I will protect you. Is that clear?" Patience nodded vigorously, relief washing over her features. "Yes, sir. Very clear, sir." When Amara finally came down the stairs, she had 2 suitcases with her, and her face was carefully composed again, her makeup perfect, her clothes pristine. She looked like she was heading to a spa weekend rather than being ejected from her marriage in disgrace. She didn't look at Michael or his family as she walked past them. Security flanked her on both sides, making sure she took only what belonged to her. At the door, she paused and turned back, her eyes finding Michael's. "You will regret this," she said again, her voice low and venomous. "You and your pathetic little family. I could have given you everything, but you chose them over me. You chose poverty and mediocrity over excellence." Michael stood, placing himself between Amara and his mother and daughter. "I chose love over cruelty. I chose humanity over image. And I chose right over wrong. That's the difference between us, Amara. You never understood that some things matter more than appearances. Now leave my house and never come back." She left without another word, the door closing behind her with a finality that seemed to echo through the entire house. Michael stood there for a long moment, staring at the closed door, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settling onto his shoulders. Then he turned back to his family. His mother was watching him with eyes full of love and sadness. Chidera had stopped crying, but was still pressed against her grandmother's side, her small hand clutching the older woman's wrapper. They looked so small sitting there on the large sofa, so fragile and vulnerable. Michael felt his throat tighten with emotion. He sat down beside them and pulled them close again. "We're going to be okay," he said, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince them or himself. "I promise you, we're going to be okay. I'm not traveling anymore for a while. I'm staying right here with you, and we're going to heal from this together." His mother squeezed his hand. "My son," she said, her voice still weak but growing stronger. "Do not blame yourself too much. Evil can hide itself very well. That woman fooled many people, not just you. She smiled in everyone's face and spoke sweetly, but her heart was rotten inside. You were not wrong to trust. She was wrong to betray. But Michael did blame himself. How could he not? He replayed every moment in his mind, every trip he had taken, every time he had called home and accepted Amara's cheerful reports without question. He thought about all the subtle signs he must have missed, all the moments when the truth was probably right in front of him, but he had been too distracted, too trusting, too foolish to see it. Over the next few days, the full scope of Amara's cruelty began to reveal itself. The staff, no longer afraid, came forward one by one to share what they had witnessed. They described how Amara would make his mother sit on a hard wooden stool outside for hours, claiming it was for her health, but really just to humiliate her. How she would order Chidera to stand in one spot without moving, sometimes for so long that the little girl's legs would shake with exhaustion. How she would serve them smaller portions of food than everyone else, claiming they needed to watch their figures. How she would turn off the air conditioning in their rooms at night but keep it running in her own. How she would speak to them in harsh, cutting tones when Michael wasn't around, then transform into a loving wife and stepmother the moment he returned. Comment what you think should happen to someone who does this to a family. Would you forgive them? Could you ever trust them again? Each revelation was like a knife to Michael's heart. He had provided everything for this family, built an empire to ensure they would never know poverty or struggle again, and in doing so, had inadvertently hired someone to torment them in luxury. The irony was bitter and painful, but slowly, very slowly, things began to change. Michael kept his promise and stayed home, working from his office in the house instead of traveling. He restructured his business so that his most trusted executives could handle the international trips, while he focused on operations he could manage locally. His mother and daughter were never out of his sight for long. He made sure they knew they were safe, that no one would hurt them again, that he would protect them with everything he had. He took his mother to the hospital for a full checkup. The doctors found she was dehydrated and malnourished, her blood pressure dangerously high from stress. They prescribed rest, proper nutrition, and peace of mind. Michael made sure she got all three. He hired a kind, gentle nurse to help care for her, someone vetted thoroughly by people he trusted. He made sure she had everything she needed, everything she wanted, and most importantly, everything she had been denied. Chidera was more complicated. The physical effects of her mistreatment faded quickly once she was eating properly and sleeping in comfort again, but the emotional scars ran deeper. She had nightmares about being locked in the cage, would wake up screaming that she couldn't breathe. She became anxious whenever Michael had to leave the house, even for short errands, terrified that he wouldn't come back or that something bad would happen while he was gone. She didn't want to play in the backyard anymore, couldn't even look at that corner where the cage had been without starting to cry. Michael found her the best child psychologist in Abuja, a compassionate woman named Dr. Ada who specialized in childhood trauma. She worked with Chidera gently, helping her process what had happened, teaching her that it wasn't her fault, showing her how to feel safe again. Michael attended every session, learning how to support his daughter, how to help her heal without overwhelming her with his own guilt and anger. In the quiet moments when Chidera was sleeping and his mother was resting, Michael would sit alone and think about the man he had been before that day. He had been so confident, so certain of his success and his choices. He had believed that providing material wealth and security was enough to protect the people he loved. But he had learned the hard way that evil doesn't care about high walls or expensive security systems. It finds cracks, exploits trust, and wears a beautiful mask until the moment it decides to reveal its true face. He thought often about Amara, though he tried not to. The divorce proceedings were moving forward quickly, his lawyers making sure she received nothing beyond what she had brought into the marriage. She had tried to fight it at first, claiming she deserved half of everything he owned, but the testimonies from the staff and the evidence of her abuse made her case impossible. Even her own family had distanced themselves from her once they learned the full truth, ashamed of what she had become. Michael felt no satisfaction in her downfall. He didn't want revenge or to see her suffer. He simply wanted her gone, removed from their lives completely and permanently. He wanted to never have to think about her again. Though he knew that was impossible, she would always be the ghost haunting the edges of his memory, the reminder of his failure to protect his family when they needed him most. But life moved forward. It had to. Michael sold the house where everything had happened, unable to stay in a place that held so many painful memories. He bought a new home, smaller and warmer, with wide windows that let in plenty of light and a garden that his mother could tend without fear. There was no cage, no storage shed, no dark corners. Everything was open and safe and filled with the possibility of peace. His mother slowly came back to herself. The fear faded from her eyes, replaced gradually by the gentle strength he remembered from his childhood. She started cooking again, filling the house with the smells of jollof rice and egusi soup and chin-chin. She sang while she worked, old songs from her village, melodies that Chidera would hum along to, even though she didn't know all the words. She smiled more easily, laughed more freely, and though she never spoke about what Amara had done to her, Michael could see the healing happening in small, precious increments. Chidera blossomed like a flower that had been hidden in shadow and was finally brought into the sun. She started playing again, really playing, with the carefree abandon of a child who knows she is safe and loved. She made friends at her new school, brought them home to meet her grandmother, filled the house with the sound of children's laughter. The nightmares became less frequent, then rare, then finally stopped altogether. She still had moments of anxiety when Michael had to travel, but Dr. Ada had taught her coping mechanisms, and his mother was always there to hold her and remind her that Daddy would always come back. Michael rebuilt his relationship with his daughter from the ground up, learning to be not just a provider, but a present father. He attended her school events, helped with homework, played games with her in the evening, read stories before bed. He learned her favorite foods, her fears, her dreams, the way she wrinkled her nose when she was thinking hard about something. He learned to see past the role of father and into the person she was becoming. This brave, resilient, beautiful little girl who had survived something no child should ever have to endure. And he rebuilt his relationship with his mother, understanding fully, for perhaps the first time, the depth of her sacrifice and love. He listened to her stories now, really listened, asking questions about her life before he was born, about the struggles she had faced, about the choices she had made. He learned about her dreams, some fulfilled and some long abandoned, and he did his best to make the remaining ones come true. He made sure she knew that she was valued, that she was honored, that she was the foundation upon which everything good in his life had been built. The three of them became a unit, a small, fierce family, bound together by shared pain and growing love. They ate meals together, walked in the garden together, watched movies together, and slowly, very slowly, built a new normal that felt safe and real and true. Michael's business continued to thrive. Without Amara's influence, he found himself making decisions based on values rather than image, choosing partners and projects that aligned with his principles instead of those that simply looked impressive. Some of his society friends drifted away, uncomfortable with the scandal or unwilling to associate with someone who had so publicly failed in his marriage. But others remained, and new friends appeared, people who valued substance over surface, who respected the way he had chosen his family over his reputation. He gave a rare interview to a business magazine, and when they asked about his divorce and the dramatic changes in his life, he was honest in a way that surprised even him. "I learned that success means nothing if the people you love are suffering," he said. "I learned that you can build the biggest empire in the world, but if you're not paying attention to what's happening in your own home, you've already lost everything that matters. I learned that cruelty can wear a beautiful face and speak with a sweet voice. And I learned that real strength isn't about how much money you make or how many people know your name. It's about protecting the vulnerable, even when it costs you everything else." The interview went viral. People praised his honesty, his courage, his commitment to his family. But Michael didn't care about the praise. He had learned his lesson about seeking validation from external sources. The only approval he needed was in the way his mother smiled at him each morning, in the way Chidera reached for his hand without fear, in the quiet peace that had settled over their home. Time passed. Months turned into a year, then two. The memories of that terrible day became less sharp, less immediate, though they never fully disappeared. Michael made sure they didn't disappear, actually. He needed to remember, needed to stay vigilant, needed to never again become so comfortable in his success that he forgot to protect what truly mattered. He never remarried. People asked occasionally, tried to set him up with this friend or that acquaintance, but he politely declined. He had no interest in bringing another person into their carefully rebuilt peace. Perhaps someday, when Chidera was grown and his mother had passed on peacefully in her sleep many years from now, perhaps then he might consider companionship again. But for now, this was enough. His mother, his daughter, and the quiet redemption of being the father and son he should have been from the beginning. On the evening of the second anniversary of the day he had found them in the cage, Michael took his mother and daughter to the garden of their new home. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and deep, peaceful blue. They sat together on a bench his mother loved, watching the colors change and feeling the heat of the day give way to the cool of approaching night. "Daddy," Chidera said, leaning against his shoulder, "are you happy?" Michael looked down at his daughter, then across at his mother. He thought about everything they had been through, all the pain and fear and darkness. He thought about the mistakes he had made and the lessons he had learned. He thought about this moment, this simple, perfect moment of peace. "Yes, baby," he said, pulling her closer. "I'm happy. Are you?" She nodded, her head bobbing against his arm. "I'm happy, and I'm not scared anymore." His mother reached over and took his hand, her grip still strong despite her age. "You are a good son, Michael," she said quietly, "and a good father. You made mistakes, yes, but you fixed them. You chose what was right when it mattered most. That is all any of us can do." They sat there until full darkness fell. Three people who had been broken and had slowly, carefully, lovingly put each other back together. The past would always be there, a shadow they carried, but it no longer defined them. They had survived. They had healed. They had learned that love wasn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts or perfect appearances. Love was about showing up, paying attention, protecting the vulnerable, choosing right over easy. Love was coming home when something deep inside told you to, even when you didn't know why. Love was breaking down locked cages with your bare hands. Love was staying when you wanted to run away from the guilt. Love was rebuilding, one day at a time, until the foundation was solid again. Michael had been called many things in his life. Brilliant businessman, self-made billionaire, success story. But the titles that mattered most, the ones he had finally earned through pain and perseverance, were the simplest ones. Son, father, protector. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Where are you watching from? Have you ever trusted someone who hurt the people you love? Have you ever had to choose between your reputation and your family? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to like and subscribe if this story touched you, because these are the stories that remind us what truly matters in this world. Not wealth, not status. Not the beautiful mask someone wears in public, but the truth of how we treat the people who depend on us when no one else is watching. That is the measure of a person. That is what defines us when everything else is stripped away. Michael Okafor learned that lesson the hardest way possible, but he learned it in time. His mother and daughter were alive, safe, healing. And every day he made sure they knew they would never be alone or unprotected again. That was his promise, his purpose, his redemption, and it was everything. If this story touched you, tell me in the comments. What would you have done if you were in Michael's shoes? Would you forgive someone who did this, or walk away forever? Your answer might help someone going through the same thing right now. And before you go, tap the like button so this story reaches more people, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Also, tell me, where are you watching this story from? I read every single comment.